Hello.
Hi,
What's your name?
my name's Harmony Slater.
Hello, Harmony Slater. Thank you for coming on the portraits. First question, what has been your practice over the years?
So my practice over the years, I feel like my spiritual practice started when I was very young. I started exploring like Christianity, diving really deep into creating a relationship with God, some higher entity, some higher power through prayer and meditation and introspection and study. And then that led me to a deeper practice and study of philosophy and Buddhism and Buddhist meditation. And that meditation, Vipassana meditation, took me into learning more about Indian philosophy, and that led me to Ashtanga yoga. And so now I would say my practice is an integration of all these things, the meditation, the pranayama, the asana, and also with some emphasis on mysticism.
All right, so there's a lot there.
Yeah.
Amazing. And how long have you been practicing all that kind of thing?
Well, it's such an interesting question because it really depends on what you consider practice. I feel like, if prayer is a practice, then I've been practicing for a really long time, since I was a child. My mom actually taught me to meditate when I was 5 years old. She was really into transcendental meditation, which is using a mantra and sitting for 20 minutes. So I was introduced to these practices for a really long time. But I would say that my own sort of initiation into yoga and mindfulness and meditation, probably about 25 years ago, I really took on a regular daily practice of some sort of meditation or yoga practice, whether it was breathing, pranayama, or asana, or the Buddhist meditation practices I've learned.
What was if you don't mind me asking about the early prayer, what was the most important thing you think you learned through practicing prayer or having prayer at the beginning of your life?
Yeah, I think that's beautiful, because for me, the whole thing is a prayer in a way. I think having a faith or a belief in something higher than yourself, in a higher power, whether you call that God or higher consciousness or higher self or ultimate reality. I think believing that there's something beyond your control, that is in control, or that's guiding you, that has your back, that's watching over you in a sense, or at least wanting the best for you. You know, that all good things come to those who believe and trust in God, right? Or trust in something beyond themselves, in something higher. I believe for me that really, on a scientific level, I think it allows your nervous system to calm down a little bit, because you don't feel like you have to fight and struggle so much and it's all on you. And I think learning that ability to surrender, to be like, things feel really out of control, I don't know what to do, so I'm just gonna lay it down at your feet and see what happens. Mm-hmm. To me, that's the essence of surrender, where you can just kind of lay it down, let go, and not be attached to the results, but also, I guess, be hopeful or believe that whatever happens is the best thing, and that you're held in those arms, that are taking care of you, mm-hmm. that life isn't about fighting or survival, that it's actually about you're being nourished and you're being nurtured, no matter even if it doesn't feel like it to you at the time, but ultimately it's for your growth and your learning and your understanding.
So it sounds like from a young age, you've just had this ability to give or surrender to something greater than you.
Yeah, I think that's probably what I learned the most through reading the Bible and praying and, going to church, and even meditation is just creating moments of silence and connection and going inside and feeling that deeper connection, that deeper awareness and consciousness. And I think those are the really powerful practices that take us and move us on a spiritual path into sort of like spiritual growth, where we can then bring that into our lives and how we relate with other people.
And so do you think that was the feeling that as you moved from Christianity, prayer, into yoga, into the other Buddhist meditation, that was the thing that kept you going, that sense of surrender, or did you discover new things as you adapted to the spirituality as it was opened itself up to you in different ways?
Yeah, that's really interesting also to think about this. So thank you for asking such insightful questions. I feel like there's always moments, especially like when we commit ourselves to a spiritual practice or a discipline, because discipline kind of presupposes some effort, some force, some willpower, right? And so it's almost the antithesis of surrender in a way, because surrender is sort of like, okay, whatever happens is fine, you know, I'm just like, it's up to you, like, you know, your will be done, thy will be done. Whereas this discipline or this effort, whether it's in I'm going to sit for 20 minutes, or I'm going to sit for an hour, or I'm going to practice asana for an hour or 2 hours or however long, or I'm going to do pranayama, requires some willpower and some determination and some assertion, which in itself kind of is a different energy, a different force that is required to do the practice. But ultimately, you can't always have that force. You can't always have that willpower and that determination. And so I think that yes, at the sort of essence and the root of my spiritual practice was always this belief in surrender, that no matter what I do, I'm not responsible for the results, but there's always sort of, I guess, a space for grace to move. There's always this X factor or this space of time or, you know, magic or grace or God to kind of make whatever's meant to happen, happen. So like the idea that you can, you know, practice for 3 hours every day and have no real insight or understanding or awareness, that only comes when you allow that insight, understanding, awareness to dawn within your consciousness. You can't force it to happen. And I think that's exactly what all of these spiritual practices are trying to teach us, that you can do all the things, but until you just be and allow whatever is to be, then that is the awakening. That's the dawning of understanding or the enlightenment, because you realize that it's not actually about the doing, it's about the receiving and the allowing and the accepting.
I really like that, the idea of being a receiver in this idea of grace. I think from what you were saying, like it's that coming from a Christian background myself, there's an element of having to understand God's grace anyway. So if you were praying and having that, there's an understanding of what grace is in the first place. How did grace change? How did that develop as your practice got? Yeah, I'll ask the same kind of question again, like a different kind of question.
Yeah.
As you developed and your prayer turned into a movement prayer, which came through yoga and all these kind of things, did grace change? I suppose I'm asking the difference between a Christian sense of grace and then a more sense of grace through a sense of the yoga practice.
The yoga practice. Yeah, I think in the yoga practice, you start to embody it. You start to feel your body and you feel the energy in your body. And so you're connecting with this flow of energy that is both in you and outside of you through the breath, but also like in your body itself. So it's really an embodied experience of life, of consciousness, of awareness. And I think that's a little bit different than the experience of sort of being raised Christian and praying and connecting to God more on, I would say, a mental, emotional level, where it's through the mind and through the heart, And so there's an emotional connection, maybe there's some like bhakti, some devotion, right? That's more emotive. There's some intellectual because you're studying text, and I think yoga also has all of those aspects as well, depending on what practices you want to focus on, whether it's the studying, the reading of scripture or texts, or singing or chanting mantras, or it shows up in all these same ways in yoga too. But with the yoga asana, which was primarily where my yoga practice started and then moved more into pranayama, it's that feeling your body and becoming more intimate with yourself. And when you become more intimate with yourself and you feel and experience all of that sensation, good or bad, nice or not nice, you gain intelligence in a different kind of way, in a way that's beyond the thoughts, beyond words, and also even beyond emotions sometimes. You can feel your emotions maybe in your tissues, not as like anger or sadness, but just as like sensation, which is really sort of a transformative experience, I think, getting to experience sensation and just being with that experience of being embodied. And then when you go out into the world, you're more sensitive because you're so much more intimate with being an embodied person. So then the way you treat other people, or the way you touch other people, or the way you see things changes because you've spent that time like really engaging with your own embodiment.
What's been the biggest challenge you've faced?
The biggest challenge that I've faced.
Your practice or your spiritual practice.
The dark night of the soul.
What's helped you with?
I think the biggest challenges that I've faced is, I think life, life in general. How do you engage in a spiritual practice when you go through divorce? How do you engage in a spiritual practice when you lose loved ones? How do you engage in a spiritual practice when you're aging? How do you engage in a spiritual practice when your ego isn't feeding you all the really good thoughts and good things because your body looks the way you want it to and you can do all the things you want it to do? How do you feel and engage and re-engage, keep re-engaging in the spiritual process and see all of these obstacles or challenges in your life as actually part of the process and actually there for you to embrace and welcome and be with, and that it's not actually about the physical thing, it's not about the good feelings. I think that's the lesson in a way, that we get addicted to the good feelings. We get addicted to the high you get when you practice yoga. You get addicted to the sensation of bliss you feel when you have a really good meditation practice. You get addicted to, having a certain kind of confidence or presence or ego about yourself because you're really feeling like proud that you can do all of these things, and you're feeling very spiritual, but when everything comes crashing down in your life, it's really hard to have that feeling of pride or confidence in who you are and in your practice, because your practice comes crashing down too, right? And so it goes back to the very beginning. And I think that's probably the biggest challenge, is always starting again. And I feel like there's a beautiful thing if in Goenkaji's Vipassana meditation, you're meditating 10 times or 10 hours a day, for sort of hour periods, and each time you kind of sit down and he says, start again. And it's been 7 days of this, and you sit down, you hear start again. And I feel like that's such good training for life in a way, because it's easy to feel like when everything's going not good, not the way you want, that you're not in a spiritual place. But I feel like that actually is maybe the deepest spiritual place of growth that you can go into. But it's challenging because it's not something that is feeding your ego. It's not something that's making you feel good. You know, it's really like being with those emotions of grief and being with those emotions of disappointment or being with the emotions of stress and just being with them and not trying to push them away or resist them or change them or pretend they're not there, but feeling into it and welcoming it and reconnecting it as a part of yourself, and then start again, right?
Beautiful. So what have you learned about yourself at this point that you would like to tell others?
What have I learned about myself at this point that I would like to tell others? I think what I've learned about myself is, through it all, that I am worthy and I am priceless, and it has nothing to do with what I do or don't do, or what my practice is or what it's not. It has to do with being human and being embodied and being an expression of life itself, and you're born with it and you die with it, and no one can give it to you and no one can take it away from you, and no practice can give it to you and no practice can take it away from you. It's there all the time. And so that's what I feel like I've learned that I'd like to share with other people.
Thank you, Harmony.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.